Hello students, today we are going to discuss the introductory aspect of social science research. What exactly is social science research all about? So in short, in this session, we are going to discuss the definitions, objectives, functions, and the nature of scientific inquiry in social science research. First of all, let us take a look at the definitions of social science research. Now let me tell you very frankly that there are different definitions given by different scholars. Multiple angles have been explored in these definitions. However, if we look at these definitions, we can classify them into two basic categories. First category is of those definitions which emphasize on the process of research work. And the second category is of those definitions which emphasize on the outcome of the research work. So if we see the process of the research work, number of scholars have actually emphasized on the way the research is conducted, and accordingly they have defined the research work. For example, many scholars say that it's a habit of questioning, many other scholars say that it's a systematic way of questioning, many other scholars define research work as a serious quest for the knowledge. And in terms of outcome definitions, we see that many scholars have gone by the notion that research outcome should be X, Y, or Z. For example, certain scholars say that research outcome should be a law or a theory or a theorem, or some scholars say that it can be an explanation of an existing phenomena, etc. So depending upon what outcome you expect from your research work and which way and method you actually follow, there can be number of definitions of the research work. Now let us have a look at what are the objectives of the research work. Primarily, there are two objectives of the research work. First is extension of knowledge. Whatever knowledge humanity has, the extension of that particular knowledge is the first and foremost objective of any research work. Second thing is, it is simply a fact-finding exercise. So it can be done at two levels, you can say. First is a simple general fact-finding exercise, and the second thing is extension of the serious body of knowledge. And which way you can do that? You can do that by questioning the existing values, beliefs, norms, systems, patterns, which actually takes you towards a new type of understanding and new knowledge. Still, for the sake of our better understanding, we would have a look at four basic objectives defined by literature for the social science research. First is description. Any research work must describe the phenomena properly. So that becomes the first objective of any social science research work. Second thing is prediction. If a research work does not predict certain things, then it cannot be understood as a research work. For example, COVID-19 outbreak. Now it's a recent phenomena that's happening for the last almost 78 days. Now government wants to really know what way COVID-19 outbreak is going to really impact our economy or our society, etc. So for that, any informed decision can only be taken when there is a proper study and proper research about it. So prediction, which way the society is going to form, what kind of behavior people are going to conduct, whether or not people are going to really give the business to the restaurants and hotel. So these are the questions which can be understood only by the predictions. If a study helps you to predict these sort of questions, then only it can be understood as a social science research work. Third most important objective of social science research is exploration. If exploration is done properly, then only we can discover the relationship between number of variables. For examples, as I told you in the previous statement, what is the relationship between the consumption of households and their behavioral patterns? For example, what amount of money they are spending on different sort of items post-COVID. So there are a number of relationships in a similar way one can assume. What is the relationship between the online classes and the result obtained, etc. So there can be any relationship that we can explore, but all this exploration of different variables and the relationship becomes the third most important objective of social science research. Fourth most important objective which literature defines of social science research is application. Now let me tell you what exactly this application means. Application means any problem solution, any fixation of problem. So if you fix a problem, or if your study or a research is capable of fixing a problem, then it is the fourth most important objective of your social science research. For example, Android application development. Now these apps are being used to really solve the social problems also. They help us in conducting social welfare surveys. They also help us in conducting so many other tasks which eventually solves the problem. Or suppose if there is a modeling problem, or there is a problem in terms of the behavioral patterns of human beings. So if there is a way which can indeed fix that problem, it can be considered as application, goal, objective of the social science research. So any social science research, I again reiterate, has four primary objectives. Either it can have all the four, or it can have at least one of these four. First is description. A social science research helps you describe certain things, existing phenomena, etc. Second thing, prediction, or it helps you in predicting certain things. Third, exploration. It should be able to explore certain relationships between the variables. And fourth is, or it should really solve some real life problem. If any of these things is happening, we can call it social science research. Now many of you can ask the most important question, which is, why should we conduct a research? So what are the basic functions of any research? So my dear students, there are two ways of answering this particular question. First is the reasons that are scientific, and the second one is the reasons which are pragmatic, real life. So let us first discuss the reasons which are scientific reasons, why a research has to be conducted. The first thing first is, research actually discovers the facts and new knowledge, as you all aware now. So unless and until you really understand a phenomena in particular, in holistic manner, you will not be able to take appropriate decision based on that understanding. First, we need to really understand the phenomena or the problem in particular and in a holistic manner. Unless and until we really do that, we cannot take any decision for that matter. So the first function and first application of any social science research becomes the discovery of facts and its interpretation. So unless and until you really discover the things, you cannot go ahead. Therefore, it is the first function. Second function of social science research is diagnosis of the problems and their analysis. So diagnosis of any research problem is a very, very important thing. Research problems, it means to say that any problem. So any real life problem could be the research problem. Until and unless we really diagnose any phenomena as to what is going on, we cannot take any decision. Therefore, to diagnose a problem becomes another major application of social science research. The third most important thing, you can understand it as systematization of knowledge. Research has a main function of systematization of knowledge also. Many studies are just kind of meta-analytic studies. It means what? They have reviewed the whole body of literature and they have just systematized as to who has done what in past. So that is another branch of, another function of research. Also, research has a function of controlling the social phenomena. Some researchers really want to see how things are going on so that they can control the things. So with the quest of controlling certain things, they perform the research work. Next is, as I told you, predict. People want to really predict. They want to look into the future and want to understand what's going to happen. For example, today, many of the businesses and industries are actually anxious about their future post-COVID-19 outbreak. So they really want to go into the future and want to see which way people are going to behave with respect to their business. So that can be one of the basic applications of research, that people want to really understand what's going to happen. So it becomes a major function of research. Next is for the planning purposes. When you want to really plan out certain social welfare schemes, or you really want to plan out certain new program, then you really need to sit down and investigate the situation. For example, in schools, colleges, universities, for any other purposes, in any other organization, the management of the organization wants to really understand the problem in particular and problem holistically in order to take an appropriate decision. For example, a library committee wants to understand the behavior of the library users. So they would like to set up a committee first, they would like to first investigate the matter, and then they would like to proceed for a call X or call Y. So that becomes one of the major applications of the research work, that you want to really take a decision, a sound decision, and for that you really need to conduct a sound study. The last and the most important thing is every research has a basic objective of social welfare. There cannot be a research study if it does not have a hidden objective or a basic objective of welfare. All the researches, be it a scientific research, be it a social science research, be it a laboratory-based research. For example, take the example of lab researches that our scientists are actually conducting to find out the vaccination of corona. Now, it is a scientific research, it's a lab-based research, but it has large social welfare implications. Humanity and people want the vaccine. So, in a similar fashion, all the programs, schemes, whatever is being conducted or is being to be executed or is going to be executed has to have a welfare objective in its roots. So, the research has welfare objective as well. Development of any kind is basically another function of research, be it institutional development or human development or a group development. If you want to grow and if you want to develop, then you really need to pursue the path of research. So development becomes one more important objective of any sort of social science research exercise. Now that we have known the objectives, definitions and functions of research, let us proceed towards knowledge generation process. Why it is important to study. As you all know that knowledge generation, creating new knowledge, is the foremost and basic function of a research study, the basic objective of a research study. Therefore, it is very important to really understand which way the knowledge is created. Now, in literature, if you see, you will find there are 5 ways of creating knowledge. Our literature acknowledges that there are 5 ways of creating knowledge. First is authority. Now, authority really tells you what is right, what is not right, what is the reality of a particular situation. If suppose you are joining an institution and the foremost authority of that institution comes to you and instructs you the do's and don'ts, so that becomes a knowledge for you. That is a new reality for you. So the reality is properly told by the authority. That is the first source of knowledge. Ultimately, what is knowledge? Knowledge is a quest for the reality. So your quest for the reality is first of all completed by the authorities. So that becomes the first source of knowledge. The second source of knowledge which literature acknowledges is tradition. Now, there are many things which we all have been doing by our traditions. Traditionally, we know which are the Ayurvedic medicines for what type of disease. So if we know that, then it becomes a knowledge for us. There are a number of other things which we do generally, and we don't know that why we do so. We do so because we have been doing so, or we have been told to do so, and that really works out well. So you can see that tradition also becomes the source of knowledge. Third source of knowledge is experience. Experience really teaches us what we really need to learn. For example, photo shooting, photography. If you are not comfortable with it, you will not be able to learn it unless and until you really go out and do it. So all the performing arts, all the knowledge pertaining to performances are done or are gained through this particular method, which is called experience. No matter how long you are subjected to lectures of this and that, you can never really gain the knowledge regarding any of the performing arts until and unless you really perform it. For example, if you want to learn swimming, so for that, you cannot learn swimming just because you are hearing the lectures. But you can learn swimming only when you are subjected and you are exposed to the swimming exercises, and you are taken to a swimming pool. If that happens, then only you will be able to learn it. So the knowledge generation in terms of performances can happen only through experience. The fourth source which literature acknowledges as a source of knowledge is basically intuition. Many people call it gut feeling or hunch. What is this gut feeling or hunch or intuition? It is this extra sensory input which certain people are believed to have a capability of. For example, in almost all the religious traditions, you will find the stories of saints which had this kind of intuitive capabilities. They could predict, they could see the reality. And so what is that knowledge? That knowledge is basically they are able to tell you what's the reality or what's the reality going to be. But that source of knowledge is intuition or the gut feeling or some extra sensory input beyond the five senses. The last and the most important source of knowledge generation is conceived to be research. Yes, you heard correctly, research. Research is the most vital and modern day source of knowledge creation. What is research and what is this quest for knowledge generation? That there is a reality and you want to go close to the reality so far as possible. So that is the approach of research of knowledge generation. So research becomes a very instrumental and fundamental part of knowledge generation exercise. Friends, the most important thing about research as a source of knowledge is that it is the only source of knowledge which has a scientific backup. It means it really adopts the scientific approach to generate knowledge. If the knowledge has not been generated by adopting the scientific approach, it cannot be termed as research. So the most significant characteristic of research is that it is a scientific process. Now, in brief, let us discuss what are the characteristics of research. The first thing first is research is a controlled exercise. So it is not something which is beyond control. It is a very controlled exercise. It is done in a lab or in a particular way, or the data is gathered in a particular field. So whichever way it is done, it is a very controlled exercise, and the controllers of this exercise are the researchers or the investigators. Second thing is, it is a rigorous process. It involves not only effort but arduous efforts and attempts, a deep understanding of the studies which have been conducted previously, and so on. Third thing is systematic. This entire effort and the journey is a very systematic journey. It is clearly outlined as to what is going to happen after what. So if the system is not followed, the process is not followed, it cannot be termed as research. Next is, it is valid and verifiable. Always research is valid and verifiable. The degree of validity differs from study to study, but then it is done in such a way that it is subject to all sorts of verification and it can be verified. Next important characteristic is, it is empirical as well as critical. Sometimes social science research in particular has to have the base of the evidences that we gather from the field or from the real life world. So then it makes it the empirical study. Next is, every research is subject to criticism. Researchers are often in a position that they welcome all sorts of criticism, suggestions and advices offered to them by others. So if it is not happening so, then again it is not a scientific process and it cannot be considered as a proper research work. So the basic quality of a researcher or a research work is that it welcomes the criticism and it is open to all sorts of questioning further. Now, having understood the basic characteristics of the research work, let us try to understand what are the scientific aspects of the research study. So as you know that research is the only way of generating knowledge which has a scientific way of doing things. Now what is science ultimately, and what is scientific approach? It's another important discussion, but it's very important because many people actually talk about science even before talking about the research, because research is ultimately a scientific approach. So what is the science behind research? We will discuss first the reasoning aspect of it. Anything which is scientific has to have a reasoning thing. And there are different types of reasonings. In social science research, we deal with three types of reasonings. First is inductive reasoning, second is deductive reasoning, and third is abductive reasoning. Now, inductive logic or inductive reasoning is the process when we go from particular to general. Suppose we have a number of premises, premise A, premise B, premise C, premise D, and they all lead to one common generalization. So this sort of a logic is inductive logic. The deductive logic means when you deduce something from general things, you come to the particular things. For example, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, we conclude that Socrates is mortal. So when you really come down to a particular conclusion from number of general statements, that is deductive logic. So research will either take the base of inductive logic, it will go from particular to general, or it will take the base of deductive logic. It will come from particulars to general, or it will come from general to particular. So inductive and deductive logic. One more logic is there which is beyond these two, and most of the times it is used when neither of the two works. This logic is known as abductive logic or abductive reasoning. Now what is this abductive reasoning? Usually a natural and instinctive process of making a conclusion is abductive reasoning. This logic is free from inductive as well as deductive logic because it is just based upon what is convenient to the researcher. Abductive reasoning or abductive logic is basically process of concluding in a way that is natural to you. So it is neither inductive nor deductive, but it's the most natural and instinctive process to oneself. So that is the reasoning. So now here the point to be noted is that scientific research has a different definitions from the general research. Now, based on the scientific reasoning logic phenomena, the scientific research can be defined in a different way, and it has been defined in a different way. Three most important things you will see in the literature as far as the definition of scientific research is concerned, and that is a research process is scientific. Second thing, it uses and employs the methods and techniques that are time tested and objectively verifiable. And third thing, they are unbiased and free from any prejudice. Now the most important discussion as far as the science of research is concerned is the different paradigms of research. Now you would ask, what are these paradigms all about? Students, as you know, that research is a quest of knowledge creation. It's a quest of developing new understandings, newer perspectives, searching the things again and again, the same thing in a new way, or searching entirely new things. So in this journey, depending upon what you believe or what a researcher believes, there can be a number of different paradigms of the research. Primarily, there are 5 paradigms, but in most commonly people talk about 3 paradigms. First is Positivist paradigm, second is Constructivist paradigm, and third is Pragmatist paradigm. These are the 3 most important paradigms of social science research. There are 2 more which are Subjectivist's approach or Subjectivist paradigm, and fourth is Critical paradigm. But before moving on to those 2, we should first discuss the first 3 ones, which are the most important things. Now you would like to ask, what are these 3 particular paradigms? Now it's very simple to understand. First thing is, depending upon the belief of a researcher, these paradigms have been constructed. Suppose, for an example, if being a researcher, I know for sure what is the reality or what is the truth out there, and I don't want any advice or any suggestion or anything from any other source, then I am fully, based on my conviction, believe that this is the reality. In that sense, I follow the method which are quantitative in nature, which are capable of measuring the reality, because I know what that reality is. So if the research is based on the belief that the reality is one single reality and I know what that reality is, then this type of research becomes positivist approach of research. Second approach of social science research is constructivist approach. In this approach, people believe that there are not a single reality which is out there. There are multiple realities which exist. So nothing is really absolute truth. So believing this, they don't adopt really to one particular quantitative methods which are measurable ones. They really adopt the qualitative approaches where they can establish the multiple realities. Third thing is pragmatist approach. This approach is whichever way the solution is obtained and the problem is solved is known as the pragmatist approach. So the third important paradigm of social science research is pragmatist paradigm. Fourth and fifth is subjectivist and critical. Subjectivist paradigm means it believes that the reality is perceptional and it is what people believe or people perceive. So based on the perception of people, the reality can differ from person to person. Believing this, whatever research is actually conducted, whatever models are actually built to understand the reality can be classified into the subjectivist approach. Last is critical approach. It means people say that reality is shaped by people and society. So time and again and constantly we should keep on changing our approach and our way of doing things in order to obtain the knowledge of the reality. So if you are one of the believer of this clan, you can keep yourself into the domain of critical model of social science research. Now the last thing is, we really would like to know what are the different types of research. Although this particular session is not going to deal in depth about the types of research, but let me tell you that there are basically two types of researches, which are pure and applied. They are also alternatively termed as basic and operational research. Now what do you mean by basic or operational or pure and applied? Simple thing is, pure research is basically purely exploratory one, which is academic research, where the research is done for the sake of research. And applied research is basically different from pure in the sense that it is having a particular objective of solving a problem. So if the research actually is directed towards a solving of a problem, then it is termed as an action research or an applied research. For example, the researchers of engineering, technology, solution-based research works, laboratory research, all these things are termed as applied research. So these are the two main branches of the research, and then there are a number of other researches into it, although at the same time there are a number of different classifications. For example, quantitative versus qualitative and so on. But that we will discuss in the next session. So thank you all for patiently hearing. Thanks a lot.